What is up, guys? Fado82 coming at you with another episode of Rust Cribs. Wanted to start with a point of clarification and state that we don't show bases from the inside out on Rust Cribs. I've had a lot of comments recently on that asking why, and that's not the intention of this series. This series is to show off base building that's going on a vanilla Rust server in a 1-week wipe cycle, to see what that looks like, to offer some commentary based around base building practices, also mechanics in the game, terrain, stuff like that. So this is, in a sense, softcore base porn if you want to think of it. This is the shit you would see on HBO or Cinemax. You can barely, it barely gets the job done, if you will. It's not Casey Moe's hardcore, hard-hitting base builds. That's not the intention of Rust Cribs. So basically, in short, this series is a epic case of blue balls for base building enthusiasts, but I hope that you can glean from looking at these footage ways to deconstruct the bases, reverse engineer them, and put them into practice for your own builds. That's the intention of it, as we also take a look at just some beautiful free cam Rust footage. What we're looking at right now is an example of just that, and this is Boga. They took over an island on Rustopia. It had humble beginnings, as we can see here, but it did morph and take on more of a life. Taking over an island is certainly a statement. Taking over anything in Rust is a bold statement, but an island is a large piece of land here, but it has inherent tactical advantage to it. Pretty self-explanatory, guys, but it's surrounded by water. It also has a choke point, which can be bad for the defenders and also bad for the raiders. But putting up cabinets in a base like this in the water is really making it difficult for people to get to the base. This base was raided, if you're wondering, but it took a lot of work to get to the base. Now look at all these cabinets here, and in a moment as you see the overhead view, you'll really see the scope of the amount of cabinets that were put down in the water here. Those cabinets are hard to break into because the water is very cold, especially as night sets in. And even though it's in shallow water, the water will do a number on raiders. So the island is really an interesting concept because it's sort of a combination of a water base and then also just a natural terrain advantage to it, and it's really interesting. Idolatry was alive and well again on Rustopia, so it carried over from the Easter season, and there was an orgy that went over on this compound here. TM, Kaya, Nike, lots of people put their Sneaky P in particular, lots of people put their skills to the test to build this compound, and absolutely amazing base here. To those who might not be completely familiar with Rust, they might be wondering what the squares are that are propped up here in the sky by the pillars. That's not simply an aesthetic touch, although it is very pleasing to the eye. It is utilitarian in function, and those house building cabinets which extend out the building radius for the defenders. What this means is that raiders have a more difficult time breaching the base because they'll have to gain access to those cupboards to build up to it. We can't let this footage go without giving some love to that glacier base with the cross on it that was built over there. The base owners here, the builders, had extra mats available, and they put together a glacier base with a cross that is really absolutely beautiful out there, and that was a lot of fun to see. There also looked like there was an interesting guy who was living up there on the hill. I'm not sure if they're aware of that. Moving on over, we are taking a look at RMW's base here. They made a bold move. This is some mid-game footage, so the base is still transitioning between wood, stone, and sheet metal, and they took over a warehouse area here, which is a bold statement because that is an area that is typically a public area, if you will, on a server. Now it does have a radius around it where you can't build, but they can go out of that area and just build around a larger radius and then house that along with their base with those high exterior wood walls, which is what they've gone ahead and done. The base itself is fairly self-contained there. It's not the most layered up base, but it's an effective compound, and these type of compounds are going to be interesting to see how that plays out with the experience system. If players can wall off areas that have higher experience yields, and that's something that is going to add another dynamic to when the systems in Rust change. Moving on over, we're taking a look at DMG's base. DMG has been perfecting the water-based build. They've used it ever since they fended off a Zerg of about 60 people with 8 men during a water-based raid, and the water, even though it's built very shallow here, is very difficult for raiders because they get cold at night. They don't have building privilege because of the cabinets, and it is very difficult to raid water bases even in very shallow water. It's very deceiving. Going back in time, this was the last wipe cycle, and it looks like they built a base here. I don't know if that's Donald Trump, a picture of Trump on the top. I don't know what that is. If anyone can clarify that, let me know. But as you can see, this base was layered up with the high exterior stone walls, as well as having the natural advantage of the water, and the cupboards in that base were very well fortified. Second to none is CML, and they put together a massive water base with even more well-fortified cupboards, as we can see down there. Look at the honeycombing going on in those building cupboards. This is a very difficult water base to raid. Again, it's built in shallow water, so that is again deceiving, but it's very masterfully put together and also very pleasing to the eye, as is often the case with CML base designs. Moving on over, we're taking a look at a smaller scale base here, which is put together by Helen Keller. Has some nice slave bases integrated into it, and the aesthetic touch of having the furnaces circle around one another was really nice to see. It really offsets Helen's Nazi signs and swastikas that were in the other room. Moving on over, we are taking a look at Big Worm 50's compound here, which is overlooking Helen's small water base, and this person and group has been putting together some wonderful base designs that I'm looking forward to showing off more in depth in the future. This is some leftover footage now that we're taking a look at, guys, of the past wipe cycle. This frog base here is the current wipe cycle, and I think the motif for this episode of Rust Cribs is really talking about building with terrain. So think about the terrain in the game and how your bases can complement the maps that you're building on. Due to the nature of the procedurally generated maps in Rust, each seed on each server is different, which means that every map is going to have different advantages or disadvantages to it. This can dramatically change the way that bases form, but as the gameplay mechanics change, so too do often the value in the maps. So as electricity, gardening, and different systems are more fully integrated into the game in the future, electricity may require water power, we're really not sure, but that would change forever how maps are viewed, and things like streams, lakes, and rivers right now that we take kind of for granted would be areas that would be immensely valuable. Alright guys, now we're going back and taking a look at the first base. Because of the introduction, I didn't do it justice, but I really liked how this compound had its back to the cliffside and the ocean here. The flank towers all had a symmetry to them. They shared this consistent star pattern that was really interesting in terms of the quality of it and also the value of it in terms of the tactical advantage. There was a quarry that was separate from the main base, but there was a large tower in the middle that protected both the quarry and the main compound. Alright guys, really hope you enjoy. Fatal82, peace.